Welcome to Taminator Tales or Tales from the Gold Mine by Kaci Tami. This story is called Chicken in a Box. Growing up in the gold mines of Watakola, which literally translate as Stone of Gold, was quite an adventure for someone who was inquisitive as I was, and being surrounded by my 6 uncles and 2 aunties who were my father's siblings, and at any given time also at least 2 or 3 cousins who would be staying with us for a variety of reasons. Life in such an extended family was, to say the least, never boring. I was the eldest child of my parents, and at the time there were only 2 of us in the family, just me and my grandfather's namesake, my younger brother, who was also my father's namesake. Being the eldest grandchildren of the clan, we were both doted upon by our family members. My uncles were either working at the mines, attending school or university, or helping run my grandfather's shop, and presiding over all of us was our grandmother. She was the matriarch of the family. She was a fair and generous woman who took an extended family whenever they needed access to education or work experience. Our house was always busy, while grandfather ran his store catering to the white expatriates who ran the mines and the local who worked in the mines. My grandmother lorded over the rest of the family. She had the enormous task of feeding the masses. Well, it seemed like that because at any given meal time there were at least 18 people, mostly adults who were more often than not my uncle's best friends. My favorite Uncle Bill was also the most popular of his siblings. You could say he had swag. Local women were always chasing after him. He took care of himself. If he wasn't working, he was working out lifting weights. On days off and on weekends, he would spend it high up in the hills, in a makeshift boys' or man's camp, I should say, overlooking my grandfather's shop, which was on an opposite hill. My sibling, my first cousin, and I were one of the few kids who were allowed to spend time with them, and it never ceased to amaze us that every time we were up there, we would always eat well. We would have a feast which included chicken and even wild pig. Sometimes the chicken was roasted in the earth oven, or simply boiled and eaten with roasted root crops like cassava or taro or even plantains. My uncle's friends would be working out, preening themselves as they lifted the makeshift weights which they had fashioned from discarded wheel rims and other metal pieces that my uncle had welded together. They would slather their bodies with oil as they lifted weights and chit-chatted amongst themselves while we sat around playing jacks or marbles or cards. Sometimes I know they drank home brews which they knew was prohibited by law and my grandmother, so on these days they camped up there at night. Kids were never allowed to stay at night. At other times would spend the day at the river that ran alongside the hill, sunning ourselves on the large boulders that framed the banks after swimming for hours, and afterwards, carried high on our uncle's shoulders, would either go up to the campsite to unearth food from the earth ovens and scoff the food down quickly as we were so famished from swimming, or go home. The campsite was a popular spot as more people joined my uncle's makeshift weightlifting group. With the increase of numbers, there was also an increase in petty theft. Rumors were circulating that farm animals, especially chicken and the odd goat or two, were favored by the thieves. Even my grandmother suffered a few losses, as a chicken coop was robbed a few times. Things came to a head when her favorite rooster was stolen. That rooster was something else. It would strut up and down in the fence of chicken coop and wake us up with its loud crowing. We sometimes amused ourselves by bringing it to the grassy area in front of my grandfather's shop and set up a mirror on a wooden crate, and we watched the rooster discover itself. It ate up the pieces of bread crusts and corn kernels that had been flung on the ground in front of the mirror. At first the rooster flung itself at the mirror, pecking away at its rival. Its tail was raised high and claws extended as it launched at the mirror. It would grunt and crow and hurl itself violently and furiously peck at the mirror. It did this for a while, and then I believe self-realization transformed it. It gazed at itself in the mirror, red coxcomb upright and its tail fan wide as it strutted back and forth in front of the mirror, and stopped and took a long look at itself for a full minute. Then, as if overtaken by a Vogue model, it began to slowly, almost in slow-mo, strut up and down alongside and towards the mirror, pecking at the tidbits we offered, and now and again crowed like it did in the mornings. But this was at midday now. Almost every moment we had, we'd sit in front of the shops, sometimes with my grandfather and his opium-smoking cronies, and laugh the time away at our rooster's antic until the day it disappeared. The day Tuntun disappeared, that is the rooster who was named after a very rotund Indian comedian come actress. I don't know why my father named him that. Perhaps he saw something that we didn't, because it was a sexy rooster, lean and tall, with a red coxcomb that stood like a crown on its tiny head and its snowy white feathers. The rooster was king of the coop and knew it too. One day he was there, the next he wasn't, gone, and not a speck of tail feather to betray its whereabouts. My grandparents were stupefied as to how it was abducted from its roost, as it always sat perched on the wooden ladder-like structure that was propped against the hen house. Rumors abounded as to who or what had taken it, but I knew who the thief was. In fact, I was the only witness to the Tuntun's abduction. He had been taken by someone who was my Uncle Bill's best friend. And how did I know? Well, it happened the day I snuck out to collect mangoes with my cousins. We were supposed to rendezvous under the barracks where the water pipes were under the pilings that propped up the building. While creeping out the kitchen door, I saw something flash in the vicinity of the kitchen cook. I stopped mid-stride, turned off my torch, and hid behind a small shrub that grew next to the house. It was then I saw him, the guy we all called Uncle Jack. He was walking along the fence, dressed in black, and carrying, of all things, a cardboard box and a kettle. That I recognized from the campsite which my uncles frequented. From my hiding place, I could clearly see into the chicken coop, and Tuntun asleep on the rung of the wooden ladder closest to the fence. I saw Jack walk along the fence, put the kettle down, sneak up to the sleeping rooster, and put the box over it, and with a quick snap dispatch of Tuntun, whose long neck was broken in that instant. I guess he must have been dreaming of himself on the mirrored catwalk. For it didn't even have time to crow. Jack then upended the box and quickly thrust Tuntun's body into the blackened kettle, and just like that crushed the box, dumping it onto the other cardboard boxes stacked beside our grandfather's store, and without missing a stride, casually walked off, carrying the kettle while humming to himself. He didn't see me, but I did, and smelled him too, as he passed by. He smelled of fresh sweat, so I guessed he must have been running, as I knew he lived in the other coal mine barracks that was about 2 kilometers away. I never told anyone about what I'd witnessed, and the very next day, when we were served chicken at the camp, I knew I was eating Tuntun. Rumors abounded, but nothing was substantiated, and soon tales of Tuntun's demise were surfaced. But I think my uncle had probably guessed who was the culprit behind it, because 2 days later Uncle Jack spotted two blackened eyes. Rumors said he had fallen while running, but truth be told, I think he had run into my Uncle Bill's fist, and just like that, he too disappeared and was never seen again. Thank you for listening to my story. If you want to hear more of the same, don't forget to share, like, subscribe to Taminator Tales by Kaci Tami.